What I find staggeringly amazing is that you have thousands of people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year to sit at the feet of these liberal idiots to learn nothing but intellectual garbage. They graduate dumber than they went in. And all these people care about is justifying abortion. They go back in history, they distort it. They distort science, they distort perspective, they distort everything just to get the world to normalize abortion. Nothing that they ever do or say will justify dismembering a child. It's wrong and you're sick.
I don't know what's more deranged, the idea that it's kind to leave somebody to die on a mountaintop, as long as you give them cocaine and hallucinogens ahead of time, or the idea that an 8-year-old child sacrifice could in any sense be considered a volunteer who consented to this practice. When we discussed the upcoming Aztec Batman film a few days ago, one of the many outstanding questions was, who's going to watch this exactly? Who's interested in seeing Hollywood convert Batman into a bloodthirsty Aztec warrior who presumably spends his time rounding up children for human sacrifices while evading conquistadors with vastly superior technology? Doesn't seem exactly like the most compelling content in the world. And indeed, in the comment section below my monologue on Aztec Batman, a lot of people identifying as Hispanic and Mexican agreed that they would never watch the film. So again, what's the target audience for a cartoon propaganda film about how really human sacrifice wasn't so bad? Does such an audience exist? Well, it turns out that indeed such an audience does exist, and it consists of women like Emily Poole, who claims to be an AP European history teacher. Poole posted this video on TikTok from her recent visit to Peru, in which she marveled at how advanced the Incan civilization was. Watch.
You were telling me the Spanish looked at this and said uncivilized. The Inca built the Morai terraces as an agricultural laboratory because each separate circle created a different microclimate so they could figure out exactly what to grow at what elevation. The Inca, who cultivated 44 types of corn and 4,000 types of potatoes. The Inca, who built this stuff 600 years ago, and it is still standing because it's all earthquake proof. The Inca, who created salt flats that still to this day aren't privatized. They're all sharing it from the same hot spring in the mountain, and everyone gets a share. Not to mention Coricancha, Machu Picchu, the fact that all of their cities were made intentionally in the shapes of animals that were important to them. This reminds me of exactly what happened in Tenochtitlan. When Cortez laid eyes on that city for the first time, he wrote in his diary that the temples were grander than anything he would have seen in Sevilla. Yeah, you're telling me the Spanish saw this and they said, nah, inferior.
Now, to recap, the Incas made cities in the shapes of animals that were important to them, and they apparently deserve credit for the fact that the salt flats still aren't privatized for some reason. And on top of that, she states that the Aztec temples were impressive to Cortez, and therefore we should infer that the Spanish were also impressed with the Incas. Now, strangely enough, Emily Poole omits a few things here. For example, Cortez also wrote that the Aztecs, quote, have a custom that is horrible and abominable and deserving punishment, and which we have never before seen in any other place. They take many boys or girls, and even grown men and women, and in the presence of those idols, they open their breasts while they're still alive and take out the hearts and entrails and burn the said entrails and hearts before the idols, offering the smoke of the sacrifice to them. Most of those who have seen this say that it is the most terrible and frightful thing to behold that has ever been seen. There is no year, as far as we have until now discovered and seen, when they do not kill and sacrifice in this manner some 3,000 or 4,000 souls. Well, that seems like an important bit of context, as long as we're citing Cortez and the Aztecs. As for the Incas, it's true that they were indeed one of the most advanced Indian civilizations in the entire Western Hemisphere, and yet, remarkably enough, they still didn't have the wheel or a written language. They stood at the very cutting edge of Indian advancement, and yet they were still far less advanced than the Roman Empire, which preceded them by 1,500 years. And on top of that, Incan temples were considerably less impressive than, say, Egyptian pyramids that were built thousands of years earlier. Meanwhile, they were still burning children alive or beating them to death or, sending them off to freeze to death to appease their gods, and also practicing ritualistic cannibalism. Now, the Incas may have built stone structures that were a few stories high, but Europeans were coming from a culture that had massive cathedrals. They had universities. Oxford University was founded 400 years before the Incan Empire existed. I mean, think about that. Expecting the Spanish to be impressed with big stone temples in 1530, it's like expecting somebody in 2025 to be impressed by a society that just started using the printing press. And this is why the Spanish were able to conquer the Incas with just 200 men, an even smaller force than they used to destroy the Aztecs. We're talking about fearsome, warfaring civilizations, the most advanced, again, in that part of the world, that had conquered and slaughtered their way to dominance. And the Spanish came in and whooped their butts in a short period of time while being outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Now, I know all this, even though I'm not an AP European history teacher. I didn't even go to college and I know this. Imagine that. That's because, unlike Emily Poole, I want to understand history, not entertain a delusional audience on TikTok. But credit where it's due, Emily Poole has successfully appealed to this particular demographic. Her video has something like 600,000 likes. All the top replies claim that it's racist to disparage the Incas and that Christian bigots are just hating on a strong, independent Indian civilization. At the same time, not everyone bought into the propaganda. Some people did point out that the Incas, like the Aztecs, also engaged in child sacrifice. And that seems like a pretty inconvenient detail if you're trying to make the case that the Spanish were highly impressed by Incan civilization, and the Incan civilization was so advanced. It's been over 10 years since Edward Snowden revealed the U.S. government's surveillance of citizens, and practically nothing has changed. Unfortunately, the House Intelligence Committee denied it, while last year they extended government spying powers. Americans are losing the privacy battle against our own government. Big Brother is watching you. That's the truth. Everyone in Orwell's 1984 knew this phrase as a reminder of their limited freedoms and lack of privacy. If we don't fight back, we risk creating a similar dystopia here. It sounds frightening. Well, it is, but there is a solution to reclaim your freedom. It's called ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is an app that encrypts your entire internet connection, creating secure channels that shield your online activity from everyone, government agencies, data brokers, even your internet service provider. Your digital life remains completely private, as it should be. Rated the #1 VPN by experts at CNET and The Verge, ExpressVPN combines powerful protections with remarkable simplicity. With just one click, you're protected. It's really that simple. It works seamlessly across all your devices, supporting up to 8 connections simultaneously. Plus, it's extremely convenient to travel with. I can connect from anywhere, and my data is protected. So find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/MattWalshShow. And Emily Poole noticed these responses, and she produced the following rejoinder, one that should disqualify her from ever teaching in a classroom ever again. Seriously, watch.
I will die on this hill. I'm specifically talking about the Inca here. We're not talking about the Mexica. That's a whole separate type of sacrifice. If we're just looking at Tawantinsuyu, the Quechua people, the Incan Empire, they practiced sacrifices like most other civilizations throughout history did in times of crisis. So famine, natural disasters. But the unique thing about the Quechua is that when you're looking at like the Incan civilization, you essentially have the elites and then you have everyone else. Sacrifices were volunteers from the elite class because they believed that the elites were closer to the gods and could therefore appease them better. Also, in terms of sacrifice, they were kind about it. Hear me out. Because unlike the Mexica, when you're like ripping out a still beating heart out of someone's chest, the Inca would intentionally use coca leaves and would use chicha and would drug up the sacrifice and then leave them on a mountain, a cold, chilly mountain, to be exposed to the elements. Which, if you're good, a volunteer sacrifice where you're heavily drugged before you die. Also, I mean, I can equate human sacrifice throughout history to so many things. And I think the fact that a lot of people are commenting, oh, but the sacrifice, is again indicative of the fact that you have received a quite white education because you are knowing them for the bad things that they have done and not all of the wonders that they accomplished. So I hope that this maybe helps you understand a different part of my most favorite civilization of all time, the Inca.
Yes, she says the Incan form of human sacrifice was, quote, kind and also voluntary. It's the elites who suffered the most. Children were merely left to freeze to death after being drugged out of their minds. Which isn't so bad when you think about it, she says. I mean, that's not a bad deal. Someone offers you a deal where they'll drag you to the top of a mountain and leave you with no food and no clothing to freeze to death. That's not so bad. Emily's thinking about it. She's like, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that one. That's an interesting proposal. Then she blames white people for having a judgmental view of human sacrifice because, she could equate, she says, a lot of things in modern culture to the ritual savagery that was performed by the Incas. Now, this kind of comes off like a parody of what a leftist female academic would say, except she really said it. It's real. A history teacher has just uploaded a video in her own name defending Indians for brutally murdering children. And needless to say, the claim that 8-year-old kids, keep in mind, these human sacrifices were often kids between the ages of like 6 and 15 years old. And the claim that a kid who was, 8 years old volunteered to die of starvation and hypothermia is insane. And if this woman thinks otherwise, then people need to ask what's going on inside her classroom. It's also notable that she doesn't explicitly state what modern practice, in her view, can be equated with human sacrifice. What does she have in mind? I mean, that's a pretty startling claim. Well, I could equate a lot of things with ritualistic child sacrifice. Oh, really, Emily? Like what? I'd love to hear more. What is the modern equivalent of carving up a living child? Well, we all know the answer to that question, even though women like Emily Poole can't say it out loud. The modern equivalent is abortion. People like Emily Poole are making excuses for human sacrifices by Indians because they want to justify today's human sacrifices by liberal women. That's why she's explaining in her sing-songy voice that the Incas were kind when they executed human beings. Presumably, she also believes that it's kind when women execute their own children today. This is your child's education, by the way, if you send them to public school. This is what they're going to hear. And I don't know what's more deranged, the idea that it's kind to leave somebody to die on a mountaintop, as long as you give them cocaine and hallucinogens ahead of time, or the idea that an 8-year-old child sacrifice could in any sense be considered a volunteer who consented to this practice. Maybe that's the kind of question that they wrestle with in Emily Poole's advanced placement history class. They probably spend hours cooking up the most disturbing and unhinged arguments imaginable, all in the service of feminism and anti-white race hatred. And for everyone else, people who opted to homeschool their children, Emily Poole's AP class is yet another reminder that you made the right decision. And that is why Emily Poole and every other lunatic who's defending child sacrifice is today canceled.